So what did your research find on the difference between leaders who take this approach, this multidimensional approach to their leadership and their leadership style, and the results that are produced versus those who don't?
Well, I mean, almost every research study that you go and find in any academic environment where they're studying effective leadership will look at the results. And the results of effective leadership, as we point out early in the book, are really not about the leader. The leader may be great, maybe a really nice person, maybe authentic, maybe has really good traits, great personality, a lot of charisma. But in many ways, this is how the leadership science has evolved over the years. Because way back when I was a kid or when I was in undergrad, when you think about leadership, it was focused on the individual personality. Are you a leader? You know, are you born a leader? Are you charismatic? Are you an extrovert? All of that, right? But the research shows that effective leadership actually is about how you impact others. And so when you study the effectiveness of a leader, what you're really looking at is the outcome of the team or the followers. And so the researchers actually don't study, they study what the leader does, but then they look to see how that impacts the followers. And good results show up when the followers are engaged. The team produces really good results. The organization is really successful. So the leadership research points in some ways away from the leader and toward the broader impact. And I think that's actually a really big shift because it's less about me if I'm the leader and more about how do I influence, how do I impact others?
Yeah, that framing really does help shift how we think about leadership, right? From self to team to organization.
It also takes away the cliche that there are only a few leaders in the world, right? You're born one, or you're in the right place at the right time, or whatever it is, you have the right personality. The research shows that, and we really try to emphasize this throughout the book, that everyone has the potential to lead. Some of them are quiet, introverted leaders. Some of them are really charismatic, but that's not what makes a really good leader. There's a lot of other capacities or capabilities that make the difference.
Yeah. You covered a lot of ground, you and Margaret, in your research. And you also write that poor leadership costs US organizations up to $360 billion a year. What's missing in the way most companies approach leadership then today?
Well, I think that the statistic that you just pointed out is very telling. And then the other one, and I won't necessarily get the most recent percentage, but you know, the percentage of highly engaged people in work is way too low, like crazy low. And so if you think about human performance, let's analogize with a sports figure, you know, someone who's Olympic level success, right? Nobody would argue that they are not engaged. Passion, commitment, struggle, hard work, practice. I mean, in order to be really, really superstar at something, you have to be highly engaged. So when the statistics show that like something like 80% of the employees in the Western organizations in particular are disengaged, then you know there's something missing, right? And so that's really what I think points to the need to sort of really up our game as leaders. And there's a lot of good leadership books. There are hundreds of them. And many of them are very valuable. I've read a lot of them. I admire a lot of the really well-known leaders. But here's the rub. Those folks write a lot about their own story. Now, here's how I coached X company to be successful, or here how I started X company and we blew it out of the park. So they're valuable to be inspiring, but how much of that can you really take away if you're just an everyday leader running a team inside a big organization? You know, not everybody can be Steve Jobs. I mean, it's like it's inspiring to read about those folks, but it doesn't give you the hands-on practices that you need. And that's what we really feel is missing, is, you know, to sort of move to a whole new level of leadership development where some of this actual evidence that's been researched, as you mentioned in 22 different countries, so it's not just the US, some of that can be applied and make everyone a better leader. And then the likelihood of the people they work with being engaged and excited and inspired also elevates. And that's what we need today. We need highly inspired and engaged, excited employees, especially at a time when there's all this fear around AI is going to take my job. And, the last thing you need is anything that's actually going to demotivate people. You need to get the most out of your people. So that's our focus.
And, I want to just turn to those 9 leadership capacities you mentioned across those 3 domains: self, others, systems. Tell us a little bit about the self-oriented capacities and why you've put this as sort of a starting point.
Well, I think the idea that you have to be willing to step back and reflect on your own strengths and your own capabilities as a starting point is core. None of us is perfect. We all have blind spots. We all have good days and bad days. And we all have patterns. Everyone has. And sometimes other people see our patterns better than we do. It's the old adage like, oh, did you see the boss today? You better not go by her office today because she's having one of those days. That's sort of typical. We're humans. So if you, before you can become transformational or visionary or any of the more advanced capacities, you really need to step back and think about yourself. And we call the ground on which that begins conscious leadership. And it's really about self-awareness and doing what it takes to actually become a little more objective about yourself. You'll never be fully objective. None of us are, right? But you can get a little bit of distance. You can get feedback. You can get a sense of what you're naturally good at and where you're kind of not so great at. You also can become aware of your, what we call shadows, or your bad habits or your triggers. And then if you can address those so that you become more grounded, more present, more aware, then you can move into those other domains from a different place, from a sense of centeredness. And then you can also leap into some of the more advanced ways of showing up very quickly. And I'll give you one example. Once you have a sense of the value of knowing that you're not perfect, and you're willing to own that with feedback from your colleagues or through some emotional intelligence assessment or whatever way you get that feedback, if you can integrate that, then you can actually be a little more vulnerable. And that humanity goes a long way. So you move, as you were asking me about these self-oriented areas, once you become sort of grounded in your good points and your not so good points, and you sort of are a little more aware of yourself, then when you move into authenticity, it's more real. Like, I know I'm not perfect, but here's what I really care about. And then when you go to share that with your team and you ask them what they really care about, it's much more likely to feel real. It's much more likely to feel trustworthy. Like you're not BSing. You're actually coming from a place of personal responsibility. So that's why those starting points are so important.